In my previous video, I shared reflections on career and life after burnout and being made redundant. And now I'm trying to re-enter the job market at possibly the worst time ever. There's more engineers for fewer jobs, and if you believe the headlines and executives, we're also competing with AI. This feels like an existential crisis. It is, and it isn't. Today, I'm going to share with you my journey from skeptic to believer. While the hype will have you think we're being replaced by AI, I think it's not the whole truth. I'll share research and articles from reputable organizations like Harvard Business Review that try to paint a more realistic picture about productivity gains from AI. I finally tried AI-assisted coding, and surprisingly, I love it. More importantly, I realize AI cannot replace me. AI needs me, and you, and any other great engineer. Let me show you how. In this video, I'll share some research and my theory that it's the developer experience in the tooling, not the underlying AI model, that can increase our productivity. To test my theory, I gave GitHub Copilot and Claude Code the same task with the same model to see what happens. The results were surprising. Curious? Then let's get into it. So I was a skeptic because my experiences with AI were not that great. Granted, I'm more of an early adopter, but for the most part, on a personal level, although I find AI summaries useful or being able to talk to my phone or car sometimes useful, it's not so great that honestly I would pay for it. And although I have ChatGPT built into my car, I spend more time yelling at the car than actually talking to it. And at work, well, AI slop, which if you don't know is basically work created by AI. So although AI can write and generate all these summaries, some humans have to then review them and fix them because at the end of the day, the AI is just guessing. So with all the AI slop, you just sometimes feel empty. Like, what's the point? And it's even worse when everybody around you is so excited by AI, but I was not the only one who was skeptical. So there's an article from Harvard Business Review from November 2025, which is actually only like 2 months ago. And it says, leaders assume employees are excited about AI. They're wrong by a factor of 2x. So they interviewed 1,600 employees, and about 76% of executives said their employees felt enthusiastic, whereas only 31 actually said they felt enthusiastic. So it felt good to be like, okay, I'm not in the minority, I'm actually in the majority. After I made the decision to leave Microsoft, more resistance faded away, especially since I could go back to using my personal Mac, work on personal projects, and use any AI tool I wanted. So with a fresh slate, I switched to the Z IDE, which describes itself as an IDE designed for collaboration with humans and AI. Sounded intriguing. My experience until then felt more like I was working against AI with like an overeager intern. And they just left me with a lot of slop, right, to clean up. So when I tried Zed, oh my God, I fell in love because it just felt right. Immediately, I noticed a major difference in terms of how Zed handles autocomplete suggestions. So most IDEs force autocomplete suggestions for you, typing the code that you didn't want to type. Way back when it used to be just sort of fuzzy matches. So at most a line or two, and it just saved me from, completing a block of code. Now with AI autocomplete, which is sold as a feature, it's generating blocks of code. And regardless of whether or not I accept them, the lines of code are constantly jumping, up and down on my screen like waves, and it drove me crazy. It also gave me a little bit of motion sickness. These differences in AI autocomplete implementation got me thinking about productivity in AI. Maybe AI, if integrated well into the developer workflow, actually could help us be more productive. But how do you measure productivity? In July 2025, a research organization named METR asked exactly that question. They designed an experiment to get realistic measurements. And so they conducted a randomized controlled trial with 16 experienced open source engineers working on issues in their open source repositories. Now, these are real repositories. They average 22,000 stars and 1 million plus lines of code. And before the experiment, the engineers who were randomly chosen to use AI, they were asked, how would you expect your productivity to change with AI? And on average, they expected to be 24% more productive. But in reality, they were 19% slower. Yes, slower. So why were they slower? The screen recording showed that the developers who used AI actually had much more idle screens. Instead of coding or actively doing research, developers were spending time waiting for AI as well as writing and reviewing prompts. And so that just takes more time in the sense that it's something extra a developer not using AI does not have to do. In that study, developers only accepted 44% of the code generated by AI, which is quite low. It's easy to say that AI is not delivering on its promised capabilities, but in my opinion, it's more complex than that. Most of the conversation around AI capabilities focused on the underlying model. For example, are we using, OpenAI? Are we using Gemini or Claude? But the model is constrained by the quality of the prompts we give it, right? And the context it receives. So we humans are constrained by the developer experience of how we interact with the model, whether it's an IDE extension, a CLI tool, or a chatbot interface. Once I finally understood that, I was excited about AI because I could see the potential if we had good tooling. So I have friends and colleagues who use Copilot and love it, and they all say, Julie, you can use Anthropic models in Copilot. But here's the thing, Sonnet and Opus are models, but Copilot and Claude Code are two different agents. And we as humans interact with the agents. So I wanted to test out my theory about the developer experience affecting productivity by giving Copilot and Claude the exact same task and prompt. The task was simple, a variable rename that requires search and replace across the entire code base, including a database migration without any UI changes. So I thought this would take maybe 5 to 10 minutes. With Copilot, it took me 15 minutes to make that change. With Claude Code, well, in 3 minutes, I fixed the database that I botched when I did the backup and rollback process. And after that, I needed another 7.5 minutes to complete the same changes I did with Copilot. So I was 2 times faster with Claude than with Copilot. And in both cases, I used the same Sonnet model. So where was the difference coming from? Before I share some of my workflow and experiences, a word of caution. Don't use AI for work unless you're allowed to and your employer has explicitly approved the tooling. Because when we're using AI, we're also training it. So don't feed the models with intellectual property that does not belong to you. It's currently still a gray legal area for many companies, so just get explicit permission before you use it. Everything I'm showing you here is a personal project on my personal computer with AI tools I've paid for myself. In case you're not familiar, AI coding happens generally in 2 modes. The plan mode, where you describe to the AI what you want. Then it creates a plan with code changes organized by steps. Once approved, we enter the implementation phase, which can be run autonomously by having each code change or execution auto-approved. Or you can do, as I do, and review each change manually. So one of the things I've really gotten used to is that in plan mode, Claude shows code examples in the plan. So I can review the code before it's being written. So obviously not all the code, but some of the code, or for smaller things, it will actually just spit out the code it wants to write. I can interrupt Claude and say, oh, you know what, rename it to this. Or I can ask questions and adjust what I want to do. So basically change my mind, right, mid-plan. With Copilot, it was really hard to get it to spit out a plan that was detailed that I could edit and review. It does use syntax formatting for the variable name. So it says here user a det, and then there's an arrow and that says user a share. But having to read all of that is kind of a pain. And now that suddenly as well just sort of jumped. It's after I asked it to actually give me a more detailed plan, right? I also corrected it and said you don't have to edit the seeds. And so now it's giving me the detail. And as you can see, the code blocks say like before and after. And it was like, I'm not so thrilled with that. And so this is what I meant by a git diff view. It's so much easier to review code this way. It's something that you're used to. And some people concluded from the METR study that basically AI can write code faster than we can review it. And that's actually one of the bottlenecks. There are also other articles that in general say that people or developers are spending more time during pull request reviews. And so for me, I feel like I am doing the code review now in real time. Granted, I'll do it again, just like when I write my own code, if I do open a pull request, etc. Let me take another look at it with fresh eyes, maybe another day before I actually merge it into the main branch. But it's just easier to review because it feels like I already did it, or also it doesn't feel like I'm reviewing something written by somebody else in a corner. We co-wrote it. To be fair to Copilot, if I didn't force it to show me the code before it actually wrote it, we might have also finished in under 10 minutes. But here's the catch. This refactor was insignificant. For any real code work, I want to review the code at every step of the way. Not just because I don't trust the AI, but I also want to stay in the flow state. Letting the AI run off and having it come back with disappointing results, even if only seldom, it breaks my concentration and flow. Like, I don't want that. So I knew that the code I generated with AI was bad in part because of me. I was new at prompting code. I was getting better, but still I was accepting less than 55% of the code generations, like in this METR study. But I found myself increasingly enjoying coding with AI. And here's why. Because of flow state, as defined by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi in his book, Flow, The Psychology of Optimal Experience. So a key part about being in the zone or in flow state is to be concentrating in an uninterrupted way. Now, even for the few minutes that Claude needed to generate more complex blocks of code, I didn't go to the fridge, right? I didn't check Twitter like one of the developers in the METR study. I was still thinking about the feature or the bug, and I was mentally preparing to review and challenge the AI's answer. So I was mentally still like present in what I was doing. And that's really thanks to the small nuanced differences in the developer experience of the Zed IDE and the Claude workflow. So originally, in this next section, I wanted to walk you through both AI-assisted coding sessions and point out differences and what made me feel more productive. But I only recorded my screen, and it was too hard to retrofit commentary. I'll do that in a future video. For now, I'll just point out differences in adding context to a prompt and reviewing AI-generated plans, both key steps before any code is written. So one of the things that frustrates me about Copilot is the autocomplete to give it context to certain files just doesn't work that well. I'll try the and it's not great at understanding sort of subdirectories or a specific file, and it'll just crap out. It's easy to name one specific file, but when your file names have patterns based on the framework and you have a bunch of index.get.js, it's not that great. And you'll notice here in comparison to Copilot, as I'm trying to add context by specifying files, it just works so much better. And it manages to narrow down on which file I mean based on the file path. I noticed as well, if you notice, I just wrote plan in all caps. I am too lazy to sometimes just hit the toggle, and I'll just tell it to plan, and it knows automatically to switch into plan mode. One of the things I'm not good at is I forget to switch back to the cheaper model to actually do the implementation. So I'm using various frameworks for this application, and certain things like migrations, I don't have to generate the code. It will have scripts that actually generate the code for me, which run in the terminal. And what's really nice is that Copilot picks up that it is an interactive shell. So as part of the migration, I actually have to select something. Now, VS Code does a really good job of opening a little terminal window thingy or tab in the IDE itself, and I can do that without leaving VS Code. That didn't work well at all, and it generally doesn't for me with Zed, and I think it's because Zed is just a bit buggy. It's very new, very fast, which is fine. It doesn't bother me. So this is the summary view when Copilot is finished. It's nice and short, and you see those thumbs ups and those thumbs down, right? You're giving basically feedback to the provider. Was this helpful or was it not helpful? And this is what I was referring to in my disclaimer about whether or not you were actually allowed to use AI and which specific tools. What you're doing, you're training the AI for the provider. Again, I do it. It's just a legal gray area you should be aware of. Again, sorry, I didn't include the whole recording. In short, although the terminal integration actually works in VS Code and Copilot, I found it much more frustrating to have to add context to my prompt by clicking around because the autocomplete didn't work. That's a small difference that's easily fixable. However, what made me an AI believer was the Zed and Claude Code's collaboration approach that includes me at every step of the way by default. It felt more like pair programming, and because I reviewed code at nearly every step, I felt like I ended up with less AI slop, which comes from agents, more than the underlying models, which were the same in my comparison. So to wrap up this video quickly, I was a AI skeptic. Part of it was burnout, part of it was fear from having to find a new job and just being surrounded by headlines about AI replacing me. When I finally decided to give it an earnest shot, I fell in love with the Claude Code workflow that's integrated into the Zed IDE. The autocomplete just works. Any sort of suggestions are out of my face as opposed to in my face, and whatever it's doing, I feel like I can steer it at any time, whether I want to, change how I name things or change the approach. It doesn't feel like something running off in a corner, doing its own thing, coming back with AI slop that I have to edit. And that's really key in understanding why I actually really like working now with AI. I hope you take away from this as well that if you're an engineer, you still have a role to play. AI will improve productivity gains, but if you're an engineer who knows how to think critically, you will still have a role to play. Like AI is just guessing. It's just guessing. And no matter what, at the end of the day, we will need more people than ever who have experience to review that code. Yeah, anyway, I gotta run. See you in the next one.